The Knowles are getting better as we speak. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here on FSU Live. We do this every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm pretty confident in that statement because that's been Mike Norvell's track record at FSU, just improving the team. So he's got a lot of new players to work with, and we will talk about it here over the next 60, folks. We got Georgitis, the Renegade Report, joining us, and of course, lock in with George's work. George and Jen getting together on a regular basis there on the Renegade Report. Hey, George, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, my friend. How's it going this Wednesday?
It's going pretty well. We've got quite a day here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our other show that I won't name right after this at 7 o'clock. Then we've got a big the State of the Voice of College Football show coming up at 8. So we've been running since about 11 this morning.
Yeah, it's that time of year. There's a whole lot going on. We've been talking about trials. There's, now 4 trials. You've got the one in Tallahassee, Florida State versus the ACC in North Carolina. You got Clemson in South Carolina, and also now in North Carolina. So all kind of stuff coming up. The one in April 9th in Florida, and waiting on the decision from the one in North Carolina currently. The judge said it'd be before the April 8th, so everybody's kind of waiting on pins and needles there, but there's not a ton of new news besides just the fact that I just mentioned that ACC did file suit against Clemson in North Carolina. But one thing that I've been talking about on my show, and Chris had a show kind of pondering, can this team be as good as last year's team? What kind of, what are we looking at? Just with 4 or 5 practices in, what's it looking like at spring practice? Are we going to take a step forward? Or are we looking like at a big step back? I'm real hyped up. I think, obviously a homer. This is the Florida State Voice of College Football show. But just from 5 days in and talking to different people, it's really kind of an exciting time at Florida State football when you see the amount of athletes across the field and the kind of competition from the very top of the roster to the bottom. It's kind of a year, we've said a lot, compared it more to 2022, because you have kind of a lot of unknowns across the field. You got a lot of guys ready to step up into a leadership position. But the difference this year is the athletes. You had like a 31% blue chip ratio coming into 2022. Now you hear 2 years later, you're in the 60s. And you've got top 100 recruits just across the field, whether you got them out of high school or they transferred for Alabama, still top 100 recruits from their respective classes. When you look at guys like Jalen Brown, Destin Hill, a guy from 2021 who you finally get, and now he's playing his sophomore year in 2024. And I guess we can start with the offense. I didn't ask which one you wanted to talk about first, but just real exciting.
I love this topic. So later this week, folks, we've got Logan Robinson, and we're breaking down all the positions. But I love this topic that George just brought up, looking at 2023, what should have been a playoff team that went undefeated and won the ACC championship and was the best Florida State team since 2013. Okay, my first thought is, if you just look at gains and losses, almost every team in the country is going to look worse just on the surface, but unless they had some kind of crazy transfer portal haul. But the thing is that guys get better. So you look at certain players and you think, how in the world can we replace him or him because his backup's not as good? Well, guys get better. That's what spring football is about. That's what summer camp. These guys lift all year. They train, they get better, and so forth. And that blue chip ratio, that, you're looking at a 30% blue chip ratio that produced the 13-0 ACC championship team, basically. And now you're doubling that going forward. And again, there's an inexperience factor, but there always is. These guys all are inexperienced at some point. So let's start at quarterback, because that's the obvious drop off out of the gate, in my estimation. I wouldn't have said that like 3 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that, but Jordan Travis duped me and became one of the best quarterbacks in the country. DJ, I'm not going to say that he hasn't gotten better, because he has. He had a really rough season a few years ago. Now he's put together 2 like 21 TD, 7 picks, 22 TD, 7 pick seasons. So he has been better. So he's learned something with a really good developer of quarterbacks in Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. So hopefully that parlays into another good offensive guy, of course, in Mike Norvell. So just starting there, it appears to be a decent drop off.
Yeah, and right before I get into quarterback, you brought up a very good point. Look, people get tunnel focused into their team. And I think I've heard James talking about this same subject. Okay. It's not just Florida State that has to replace people. And Mark spoke on it. When somebody leaves, Michigan had 19 people at the combine, so they're losing 20 something upperclassmen, NFL, undrafted free agents by you add a couple more guys. Florida State lost 12. They lost an Akeem Dent. But who are you replacing them with? When you look at a team who is your top competition, your game you've got circled, it's Notre Dame and Clemson, but within the conference, it's Clemson. Just happens to be where DJU came from. But the guys that they're losing, they're having to replace them in some cases with true freshmen or totally unproven young guys. Florida State and kind of the new way that Derek Ray and Mike Norvell have done their personnel, you're getting guys in who are at a different level, and you're able to just kind of, and a lot of times, upgrade. You saw it with Jermaine Johnson in 2021. You saw it with Jared Verse and those guys in 2022. You saw it with Braden Fisk. And to your point about quarterback last year, guys, Jordan Travis went out against before the Florida game. So you saw this team go on and win its ACC championship, should have got a title berth with a Brock Glenn, who's probably going to be he'll probably be your second quarterback, but, all the kind of thing. It's all towards, DJU. As far as addressing the position itself and how much drop off we'll have between, kind of the last 2 years, what we had in Jordan Travis, what we have this year in DJU, I would say it's going to be different. It's going to be very different. Luckily, another factor in this is the schedule. And this is another thing I've heard James talk about. Like, DJU doesn't have to open up against LSU in this giant game and have 3 conference games before September's over, and all these things. It's not too bad of a schedule. I think DJU by the end of the year is going to have his best season ever at quarterback. So he's had like a 3-to-1 touchdown ratio you mentioned a minute ago. I don't know if he gets to 4-to-1. We predicted somewhere on the show around 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. I think that, in this offense filled with playmaker, he's going to be able to do that. And the quarterback room as a whole is far and away the best it's been. You can question, because of the elite play of Jordan Travis, the last 12 games of his career, whether DJU is going to be able to live up to that level. But when you look at having DJU and then Brock Glenn and then Luke Kromenhoek and then a walk-on 4-star and Trevor Jackson, the overall health and depth of that room, it's in a beautiful place.
James is here. Big Game James Coleman, Den Media Group. James, appreciate you being here as always, sir. What we're doing is, George had mentioned that Chris served this up the other night in regards to, can this team be as good as last year's team? And so we started to make some comparisons and started at quarterback.
Again, the biggest thing is it's all about schedule comparisons. There's no LSU to open up the season with. There is a lot of comparisons to 2023 schedule in general. It is, I'll give respect, because out of both rivalries, this one tends to be the better. This one team seems to be better, but I would say it's a 3-team schedule. But but last year, where the schedule was toughest, was in September. Now you have a pushback to where October is really when you're going to have your first real test. Then you get the rest. Then you have another test against Miami. Then you have another. I mean, we can call it games. You got to win them, but nothing is as tough as playing Notre Dame. And what we've seen the last decade or so is Notre Dame tends to kind of start trending down for whatever reason that month of November. They'll have a quarterback controversy that they'll have to try to figure out with Riley Leonard not being fully healthy right now. They'll be a very good team, but they won't be what they were. And I'd argue that the team that Notre Dame had that came into Doak a few years ago, 2020, 2021
Yeah.
was hands down, top to bottom, way better than Florida State was. And Florida State took them into overtime. So, and honestly, that's true. Had the game won if some things would have happened a little bit differently. So when I say this to people is, to me, the talent level is similar to 2023 from top to bottom. I'd argue that the roster is better. I'd compare it more to 2022, considering that we don't have the guys I call the jersey names yet.
Mhm.
In 2022, I was trying to convince Seminole Nation that Jordan Travis is nowhere near as bad as what people think he is. He's actually really, really good. And, people call me crazy. We didn't know who Johnny Wilson was. We didn't know who Trey Benson was. We didn't know who Mekhi Pittman was at that time. We didn't know. There's a lot of unknowns. Jared Verse people were excited about him, but we didn't know. Would he be Jermaine Johnson? Would he be worse? Can you catch lightning in a bottle twice? Who knows? D tackle wise, who's healthy, who's not healthy. A lot of question marks in that 2022 team. Ended up winning 10 games with a better Clemson, a better NC State team that, regardless of whether you think they're good or not, historically, we just don't play NC State like we don't dominate them. It's always a hard-nosed game. And trying to think
4 NFL D linemen that year.
Too. Yeah,
4 legit guys
with the NFL left tackle as well. So it's
Louisville was baked in that run.
Yep.
Wake Forest, when they had like 60 upper seniors and everything because of COVID.
So what I'm saying is that we don't have that. We got North Carolina without Drake May and still has it with no answers to their defense. We've got we don't have NC State on our roster. We have Duke minus Riley Leonard. I personally tell people go watch the game, not just for the enjoyment, but go watch the game. But I'll give Riley the scrappiness that he kept it, but the game was trending back to where Florida State was at, even with Riley Leonard in the game. But it's, again, you have all that. So I'll say all that to say DJU 3-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I don't need DJU to go 4-1. I need DJU to go 3-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and we're going to win a lot of football games. I need Malik Benson to be at least comparable to what Pokey Wilson was in 2022. I need Hakeem to be what we thought he was. I need Destin Hill to be what we've hoped him to be. I need, you've got a lot of guys that are there, a lot of hope. They ain't made a play in Florida State yet. So now I will say this. The defense is full of people who made plays at Florida State. Shaheem Brown, Azaria Thomas, Fintrell Cypress, Conrad Hussey, Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton. And now, so even with those guys alone, that's a solid defense. Now you add into it Marvin Jones Jr., who you're hoping he's somewhere in the spectrum. Can we capture lightning in a bottle 3 times in a row with a transfer portal DN? We're hoping he's between Jared Verse and Jermaine Johnson in terms of production. Earl Little Jr., who actually wasn't bad at Alabama. He's coming over here to give you even more of a wealth of embarrassment of riches when it comes to the secondary. People complain. We have DJ Lundy that came back that looks better. He's a productive linebacker. And then you added a piece with Sean Murphy, who, for what I'm looking at, looks pretty good at that linebacker position. And then that's Darrell Jackson. The only time we saw him play was against Georgia, and I'm not going to hold that against him. You're going out there, you lost a lot of guys. All that being said, nobody has 85 cats. 85 is a scholarship limit. Nobody is perfect from 1 to 85. But if you've got your 2 deep, or I'd argue your top 50 are just as good, if not better, than all your opponents, that's who's going to play a majority of the games. I'd argue that Florida State right now probably has 60 to 65 guys that are pretty good. So if you lose 12 guys, as long as you don't play a Georgia or somebody like that, you should be relatively okay to get through the season. But that's just looking at these guys from seeing 2 practices, and I'll be at practice tomorrow. And as I tell everybody, my opinion is cool. It's only one person that I think Florida State really, if they impress this person, then I know we're going to be on track. And it's like Groundhog Day. Like when he comes out and he doesn't like to practice, then that's like, more months of bad luck. But like if Trey's going to practice tomorrow, my son. And if my son goes in there and gives him a good report, every time he's given a good report, Florida State has looked really, really good. So I'm looking forward to what he has to say. But from what I saw a much improved team.
I can't wait to see
improved team that's going to be fine.
I can't wait to see Trey's thing. And before Mark changes or we go to Chris, I just wanted to point out what James said a bunch of times about lightning striking a bottle twice, 3 times at defensive line, at linebacker. I would just, for people out there, I know it's hard to think, but just think back to 21 and 22 and what you thought of Johnny Wilson coming in, what the national narrative was around Jordan Travis heading into year 2, year 3. And then look at where these guys that we've brought in were thought of, where they were ranked. 247 actually had them as blue chips. So I have the ultimate faith that these guys are going to come through. You can't have, hits, but one of these 3 DNs, I have the ultimate faith is going to come through. And like James spoke of, 3/4 of the roster is at another level than it was before, whether they have the starting experience or not.
Chris Frazier's here, Spiratics, right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate Chris, James, George being here on Wednesday nights here at the Voice of College Football at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So, Chris, blame George, but he let me steal your topic from the other day. Can this football team be as good as they were in 2023? We've looked all over the place, but especially at quarterback, because that's the most obvious place to go to say Jordan Travis, one of the very best in the country. DJ has not been that, maybe more like a top 25 or 30 guy. So I know you've already run through this to a certain extent, but where do you go when trying to compare these 2 teams, at least at this point?
Well, to me, and this some people would disagree, I'm sure. I'm not a Clemson fan nor an Oregon State fan, so I'm sure those would disagree with me. But DJU got coached by an offensive coordinator that was let go the same year that he transferred. Oregon State's not known to be this miraculous national contender at any point that I know of. There's a different level of coaching at Florida State right now. There's definitely a different layer of play calling that's going on at Florida State on offense. I think Tony Tokarts doesn't get enough hype for what he does with developing quarterbacks on top of what the team does within itself. But I think that DJU, it'll be a huge failure if this isn't the best college or collegiate year under DJU. One, yes, he's older, but changing the question mark behind Florida State isn't if they can be as good as 2023. The question is, will they mesh together quick enough to be as good? If I knew that this team would be here for the next 2 years with DJU and so on, and I would say, yeah, this team will end up being better than the 2023 team just based off of the level of talent that's now on the roster versus what it was. And that's all around. We got to quit acting like DJU wasn't a 5-star prospect. Everybody else uses it in their favor, but when we talk about Florida State, well, he didn't show that he was a 5-star. He didn't do good enough at Clemson, or he wasn't good enough at such and such at Oregon State or whatever. My issue with any of that is if he was anywhere else, they would be talking about they got a former 5-star quarterback out of high school, blah, blah, blah. He's done this, but coaching wasn't that. So I'm going to do the same thing that everybody else does and say that I think that our coaching staff will develop DJU to his best potential. So we'll see what happens, but based off everything in the very short amount of spring that we've had, DJ is what was expected, and Mike Norvell being excited about it, the way he was excited about Jordan Travis last year, that feeds me a lot of hope because Mike might have coach speak, but I don't think Mike BS's his fan base or the people around him. So if he's excited, we should be excited. He's just one of those guys. So I think we will, as long as we mesh together, we will be as good as 2023.
So if we go to the weapons, James kind of ran through the weapons and the uncertainty of some of the guys that had come in the past, and then they proved it. Keon Coleman, nobody questioned that because he had caught 50, 60 balls at Michigan State. When I look at the ceiling of Hakeem Williams and Destin Hill, then it's like, okay, I can see it. Obviously, they have yet to prove it at this level. Hakeem Williams hasn't had a chance. At running back, though, is there another Trey Benson between Roydell Williams, Lawrence Toafili, who's been really good when given the opportunity and healthy and all that? So, George, Trey Benson, I think, this is a guy that, as James mentioned, when he comes from Oregon, had very little experience, and he turns out to be one of the best running backs in the country.
Yeah, I won't spend a ton of time on this. I feel like you hit the nail on the head, right? Kind of where you were leading me with that one. Roydell Williams, and it goes to what I kind of said before we went to Chris. These guys that have came in, a Roydell Williams, his pedigree, versus what Trey Benson when he came in, injured, people wondering if he's ever going to be the same guy again. Johnny Wilson, been at Oregon or Arizona State for 2 years and only had 100-something yards, but all these blocking, I have, the utmost faith that Roydell Williams and even a young guy like Cam Davis coming in is a different kind of running back prospect that we've had here at Florida State in the last few years. So yes, Trey Benson, we kind of knew what we had going into this year. But I do agree that Toafili is ready to step into a starting role. There was times I didn't want to see anybody but him touch the ball in that Louisville game. The way he was rushing and using some of those wildcat packages. One of the predictions I made, somebody already said one of them. I made 4 predictions earlier, but one of them is that Alex Atkins will have, the most rushing yards from running backs in his offense in his time at Florida State. And I think that's just kind of your top 3. And then you have Kazai even there, working to be in that top 3 with LT and Roydell and the rest of those guys. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Here's what I tell people when they ask, these similar questions. What was Jordan Travis before Mike Norvell and his staff developed him? What was Trey Benson before he was developed at Florida State? What was Johnny Wilson before he was developed at Florida State? What was Jared Verse before he was developed at Florida State? Who was Braden Fisk before he was developed at Florida State? Who was Bell before he was developed? Bell had some production, but he didn't have near the production and make the plays that he did at Florida State that he did for South Carolina. I mean, he was a good player, but was he what he is now as being a draft pick? Was Jared Verse going to make it be a first rounder if he was to stay at Albany? Was Fisk going to be a first rounder if he was to stay where he came from? No, these players were good, and the thing is Mike Norvell and the staff are like most men. When we look, if you love cars, you look at an old rust bucket that your wife would look at you and say, "Damn, why do you want a car that looks like that?" Because we don't see what it is; we see what it can be, and they know that they have the talent to make it what it can be. So, Jordan Travis was talking before Mike got here. Was talking about being a wide receiver, completely just giving up on football, and he had a coach tell him, "No, you see those Heismans out there? We think you can be that." And there he was in the Heisman race till he got hurt. Trey Benson didn't do anything at Oregon, which I'm repeating some of what was said, but Johnny Wilson for sure had almost no production whatsoever as a wide receiver. Now he's going to go in the NFL draft. Would he have went if he stayed at Arizona State? I would like to think so because Kenny Dillingham took over, but not under what he had before that. So I think what people are leaving out is just how good Odell Haggins is at developing defensive tackles, how good Papuchis is developing defensive ends. And then what was Kalen DeLoach before this staff came in here and gave him the opportunity to play? That would be the one I'd say you had true talent, that the only thing you really needed for that kid was to let him get the opportunity to play. Outside of that, I think there was huge development made at every position of those that we're looking at possibly being, NFL draft picks now. And now you've raised the entire talent level for the 2024 squad with what you brought in. Jared Verse was a no-star, 2-star at best when he came out of high school. Fisk was barely a 3-star when he was coming out of high school. You can't tell me that everybody else just missed on these guys, and all of a sudden they become this force to be reckoned with at Florida State, and that's by lightning in the bottle. When you did it 2 years in a row, who was Jamie Robinson before he left and came over to Florida State from South Carolina? There's so many guys that you can point out and say, well, what were they before they came here and got developed? And I think that's what we keep missing on. Great for the kids. Glad they have talent. But I'm more happy that they were coachable and that this coaching staff gave their all into those young men. And now they've turned into the football players that they are today from also the coaching and also their God-given talent and willing to be coached.
And along those lines, I'm curious to hear from James. I'm guessing, James, you can think of certain guys that you played alongside or played on the other side of the ball from, teammates, that one season you were like, he's a weak link. He doesn't know what he's doing, whatever the case might be. Then maybe by the next spring, wow, he's added 20 pounds. He's better, or he knows what he's doing. He's figured some things out. And then by August camp, wow, he's better. And then by the next football season, he's almost a different player.
It happens all the time. I mean, one of the things that we do too much as America loves underdog stories, they love throwing people away before they even have an opportunity to develop. I mean, like I joke with people, I turned 18 during freshman tour days. So I went to college at 17. And most of the guys in my class, we call it a Duval red shirt now, they came to college at 19. Like one guy, I won't say which teammate it was, but that was in my class. He turned 21, like right before the bowl game. So like they're grown men, and I was like, and your puberty hits people differently. We're all growing into our bodies, and as well as adjusting to a myriad of other things. Going to college, going to class by yourself without your mom and dad waking you up. Workouts, coaches ain't nice to you no more. It's a lot of different things. So I'll say that like guys kind of hit their switch. I also like to say it's a boxing term, but styles make fights. So how can the guy, I forgot his name, he looks like Fluffy, the old comedian, beat Anthony Joshua, who was the heavyweight champion, but Anthony Joshua makes everybody else look like everybody else who looks like they can fight good. Well, how can Wilder lose to I can't think of my guy's name, the Gypsy, the Gypsy King. Fury. Tyson Fury's style is so twitchy and he can take a punch that, that style made that matchup. So what does that mean? Johnny Wilson gets recruited because he's a pretty decent kid out of high school to go to Arizona State. But Mike Norvell sees a piece in his offense where he can utilize him and make him better. Why does, Trey Benson? And Trey Benson gave a great look at to why he went to Florida State. Mike Norvell was one of his first offers coming out of high school at Memphis, and Mike just never kind of let go of that. Same thing with Jaheim Bell. Jaheim Bell was looking at coming at Florida State, but he was a bigger wide receiver, and Florida State wanted to make him a tight end. Florida State could have just lied to him like South Carolina and just said, hey, come on, play whatever, and then next thing you know, you're a tight end. But they didn't. They kept him. They said they were going to keep the man. They told him that he was a tight end. So then he comes back when they say, hey, show me how you want to utilize me. I say these things to say that when Mike looks in the transfer portal and in recruiting, he's looking for specific things. He's not looking at your stars. Hell, Mike said on my show, one of the first interviews that he's ever done was, I can't help the star that you come in as. I can only help the star that you leave. And now that he's gotten 4 years into this, you're seeing the proof in the production with 12. Like we got 12 guys that went to the combine. Akeem Dent should have went to the combine. Big Meech probably should have went to the combine as well. And Roddick maybe not, but there's 15 to 16 guys that they're going to get a chance to get a cup of coffee in the league, and that is a high number for any team, in particular for Florida State. But I think Mike has a system and a philosophy that's going to always cater and make things better, and it's only going to get more fun because if you take I don't like to look too far in the future, but if you look into 2025. We don't know what Bama going to look like without Nick Saban, but I can tell you what I'm not afraid of: Alabama without Nick Saban. So, but that's still a game that you have to respect, and similar to what we had with LSU. But the rest of that schedule in 2025 isn't very difficult. So you're going to have a lot of guys get to the NFL draft next year, potentially get drafted in the 2025 draft. That's going to be something to where now high school guys got to say, all right, man, they may not love on me like everybody else in recruiting, but if the goal is to go to the NFL, they sure as hell putting a lot of people in the NFL. And what does that look like? Ohio State, Georgia, the other teams that are kind of in the top. They're the reason why they can go in and recruit the way they recruit is because, hey, if you want to go to the league, just look at our recent history. So I think that's one of the things that Mike and these guys have going for them. On top of the fact that they just got a good system and they know how to. They just seem. Mike had the best quote. Again, Mike's got a lot of quotes, but Mike had a quote like, "We don't take the most transfer portal players. Ours are just good." So it's like he's like we don't like there are way more people who take way more people, more portal guys than we take. We just happen to have starters because our system is good enough for them to get developed. And again, that just they have a system, they stick with it, they ride with it. On top of having a bunch of coaches that aren't leaving every year to go do something else, which I think is also indicative of the type of program. Is people talk about culture, but you got coaches as well as players that want to stay.
No doubt. And James, you kind of hit upon this. So George, when I think of a game wrecker on defense, I think of the edge position. Obviously, it can come from a lot of different positions, but I think an edge guy. And Jermaine Johnson was the big transfer that kind of was one of the leading players to turn this program around. And then obviously he spun that into a top 10 NFL selection to the Jets. And then it was Jared Verse. And James went through, obviously, a lot of hype surrounding him, but he played at Albany. So boom, he becomes a star. And so is Patrick Payton? Does he have that kind of potential?
That's kind of the exact point, that I made earlier. And to what James was just saying, Patrick Payton, that's another, and also a prediction I made. I think either Patrick Payton or Marvin Jones Jr. is going to get to that 10+ sack number and be that guy. Will they be Jared Verse in year 2? That's kind of tough, but the kind of performance you saw somewhere between the performance you saw from Jared Verse in year 1 and kind of what Jermaine Johnson did, I think is absolutely on the table. And to the point of what Chris was saying, is it lightning striking in a bottle, or is it more along what we've been talking about in Norvell identifying the exact traits he needs in a defensive end and getting him on campus? Patrick Payton in specifics, he was a high school guy that we've brought and developed since he was a 3-star. What's just important as reloading every year and adding to the portal is that number at the bottom, the number of guys that leave every year. 15 to 20 guys every year leave. Just as, that's how you have room to bring 15, 20 portal guys in, et cetera, et cetera. The guys that stay around are the guys that are 100 bought in, and they're a part. There's 8 of them from 20, 8 from 21, and Patrick Payton's one of those guys, and I absolutely believe he's going to kind of step into his own and be at worst, 3rd-round draft pick. If I had to predict, I'd say 2nd round. But yeah, he has a chance as that pass rusher out there, to do it. I think he can. And either him or Marvin Jones will have over 10 sacks before it's over with.
Oh, my bad. Too. Patrick Payton's the guy. Like, you asked me one question too, Mark, and I didn't answer that. But Cam Wembley is the guy. Cam Wembley was I believe he was the number 15th overall pick in the NFL draft by Tennessee Titans, if I remember correctly. In my class, he came in my recruiting class. Was a contributor by the time he was a junior. Played, but not like was a player. But I remember like that spring of our junior year, like, oh wow, okay, Cam gained a little bit of weight. I was like, Cam done grew up a little bit. Like he's not just a speed rush guy. All of a sudden he got a bull rush now, and all of a sudden he's got some moves. And we go into fall camp, and he's like unblockable. And then we play Miami that first game, and I think he had 2 or 3 sacks on, was his name Eric Winston, I believe. But he was a left tackle that was an All-American going into the season, and Cam made him look like a total idiot, and basically got drafted off of that game alone of what he did. And then just seeing some of the things that he did. I remember one time he got cut blocked, great cut block by the running back, and his legs went all the way up in the air, and his hands got on the ground, and he did a push-up, like a handstand push-up, to get back on his feet and then reach back and then grab the quarterback to bring him down for a sack. And I was just like, man, I don't know if he's been on some HGH. Well, we didn't know what HGH was, but all we knew was steroids. I don't know if he's on roids or what's going on, but I'm grateful because he's really, really good. So, just stuff like that. You do see guys, then you see freaks like Antonio Cromartie, who just Cromartie was Cromartie. Like that guy was like, some people are born to do certain things, and that guy was born to be a football player. So, and tongue-in-cheek joke to have kids, but he did both of them at a really high level. So, that's but yeah. So I think Patrick Payton is a guy that's kind of like that. He's been the Robin for the last few years. He hasn't been the guy, but I can see him kind of coming into his own this year. And it's, again, he's the guy, but like what is Marvin Jones, what is Durajay, what is Lolo, a lot of these other guys, it's kind of, I'm intrigued. That defensive end room is crazy because we can argue that defensive end room is better this year than it has been in the last 2 years, which, again, Jared Verse, for all intents and purposes, considered a top 15 pick.
I feel like Pat Payton I've seen some tongue-in-cheek comments. Like, he's got a little rivalry going there with Marvin Jones Jr. He wants to show guys that he's kind of that guy. Very interesting.
Chris, we got you here. I got to get a recruiting update out of you.
Well, we did really good this past weekend. We had, and also going into this week, we've done really well. So far, we've had 15 of the top 15 offensive linemen on campus, and I have to put that out there. The top 15 offensive linemen have been on campus in the past 8 days, if I'm including today. So in the past 8 days, we've had 15 top offensive linemen. If you go look at defensive line, which is mostly the tackles, we've had a lot of really good defensive tackles on campus. The best part of this is how you know that Florida State's in the run for any of these guys is that they immediately set up an official visit. Every one of these guys, except for 2, and I'm talking about everybody that showed up, everyone except for 2 have set up an official visit at Florida State. To see Buchanan, which is an offensive lineman that was set to be at the University of Florida for an official visit, he cancels that visit and comes on an unofficial to Florida State. That speaks volume of what recruiting looks like at the offensive line position right now, whereas a lot of fans are worried about it. I'm not, just based off of what's been coming in. You're also in the running for 2 of the best running backs in this class with Alvin Henderson, and I think the other one's Lewis, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how to say his last name if I'm wrong, but 2 of the top running backs in the class has been to Florida State. Both have set an official visit. You've got Tramel Jones that's came back tremendous amount of times now. That's your 2025 commit for the quarterback position, who plays over there with James Coleman, as he is the running backs coach, but that's who he plays with. I don't think that people realize how good we are at DB and how much hype's around it. We did really well in the class before this one, but there was a lot of playmakers that showed up defensively as well as offensively this past 8 days, including today was actually a pretty big one, which was surprising to me because it's a Wednesday and that many kids showed up, and they all set an official visit today except for one of the guys, and he still has time to do so. It's just we're worried about recruiting at some portion of our fan base because they want to see linebackers recruited better. This is the best I've seen our staff recruit linebackers to this point. Now, recruiting them and landing them, landing them is part of recruiting. We haven't landed them yet, but when kids are coming in and they're actually excited about what they saw, they're having the conversations, they're wanting to set official visits right away. All that bodes well for what recruiting is set up for anyway. So, and hearing it's a little bit different. If everybody goes and listens to these top recruits when they talk about, what was your visit like at Florida State? Oh man, this thing that they were doing in practice, or hey, what Coach so and so said, it hit me different. And this is like one of my top schools now, and there's just so many different things that they're saying. That last year we got a lot of guys on campus, but they weren't talking necessarily like they were excited to see Florida State or they were excited about this particular thing at the visit. It was like almost coach talk for recruits. So it was just genuine cliches that were being given out. Oh yeah, Florida State's good. I liked it. It was fun. It was this. That's what they were saying last year. Now this year they're pinpointing things that really intrigued them to want to set up an official visit or want to stick around the campus an extra day. Because multiple recruits did that. They stuck around an extra day. And that also bodes very well for what you're trying to do in recruiting. So I think everybody that's Florida State fans should not be worried about the 2025 class. I said it last year. I'll say it again. The 2025 class may not have all of the wide receivers and DBs and the offensive playmakers that we got this past recruiting cycle in 24. But this one's gonna have a lot of big men and a lot of depth pieces that we need at linebacker, at defensive tackle, at defensive end, at offensive line. That's you're going after particular position groups this year versus what you had to go after last year. So very impressed with what Coach Atkins and Randy Shannon and Ernie Sims, that has not been mentioned as a full timer yet, but what they're doing as far as recruiting goes. I'm also very impressed with what Tony Tokarts keeps doing with. I'm assuming that him and now I'm forgetting the kid's name, Trammell. I'm sure that they're starting to begin to have a good relationship. So I'm excited for what we actually land, and I think everybody needs to chill as far as what we've got landed. It's still March. I know it's almost the end of March, but we're still in March. Everybody needs to chill out.
I believe your guy's Byron Lewis, the running back out of American Heritage High School in Fort Lauderdale.
That's him. I knew his last name was Lewis. I knew I was right.
All right, Chris, what's going on at Spear Addicts these days?
Well, the show has been great. The breakdown show that we just did Monday night. Me and James were talking about, which room we were worried about the most, as far as that might need some help out of the portal or might need to see some guys step up. Mine started off with the defensive tackle room just based off of not having enough depth. Love what's at the top of the list. We took that all the way down, to every position group except for special teams. I don't break special teams down like that because the majority of our special teams is returning. I mean, majority of that's your kicker. So, no offense to anybody else that plays on special teams, but that's what it is. And with Fitzgerald coming back, I don't have much to say about special teams, but we went in orders, which room we were worried about the most, and once it was great because once we got to the offensive line room, you had four more rooms after that it was really hard to critique. It was really hard to say that it wasn't more talented or it wasn't enough depth or so on and so on. Enough returning pieces like Shaheem Brown at safety, like Conrad Hussey going into his second year as the other safety. There was a really good conversation and a great breakdown that we did this past Monday. Tomorrow night's show, as long as one or two things break early tomorrow morning, even up to 11 o'clock in the morning from what I was told, those things break. We'll have a great show because there's a lot to talk about on that topic for what's coming out. So we'll see if that doesn't come out. I have to change what we're talking about, but that's usually how media goes. You got to go with what news is out there, and unless you're going to break something. I'm not too fond of breaking news because they don't usually want you to. So I don't. But I'm really excited for Mondays. Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. We haven't missed an episode, and I don't know if we have yet. Not to my knowledge. I think we've only pushed one episode to a Tuesday that was a Monday night show. So very excited to keep that going, and really excited for getting James on there as much as he comes on. Thursday he's going to be a little bit late, I think, is what he said. But
Yeah.
he'll be on there, and it actually bears well because I get to get all my crap off the top of my chest before he jumps in. Worked out great for Monday night show, or it might have been Thursday before. But we're just doing what we can to keep everybody informed the correct way, the best of our ability, and not feed them a bunch of clickbait, because I see a lot of that coming around, because right now there's not a whole lot to talk about other than 2 or 3 spring practices. That's what everybody else is talking about. So they put out a bunch of clickbait.
We get a strange situation with this live stream, so I apologize, everyone. I don't know what the deal is exactly because we started on private. I switched it over after a couple minutes because I saw nobody's watching us. We've got about 70 some people watching us and have been since near the start of the show, but for whatever reason, maybe can't comment because we've gotten no comments. So anyway, I don't know what happened there because they're always defaulted to live.
YouTube has been funky here the past couple
Yeah, it
days.
must be.
So
Because I've done 1 or 2 of these. Or 10,000. So I don't know why this one turned out this way, but we've had people jump on and watch, but they just can't comment apparently.
There's plenty of comments. We just not seeing them.
Oh, okay. I got you. Okay. Okay. So the Renegade Report, what's going on there, George?
same as usual, Tuesdays and Fridays, 7 Eastern, and then Sundays sometimes around noon to 3 p.m. We've been talking case, waiting on the ruling, as the judge is set to rule on that case in North Carolina on the motion to dismiss and the motion to seal. So waiting on that. We did our last show, we just kind of talked about the defense because we had already been over the offense the previous week. Just talking spring football and the cases mostly. I do want to use my time here to say one thing about what Chris touched on there earlier about the recruiting strategy and how it's not going to have necessarily all the flashy wide receivers and this and that, but it's going to be beef. That's kind of a product of the portal and what I was talking about, how Norvell and Ray like kind of 15, 20 people leave, you bring 15, 20 people out of the portal. Year after year, you're constantly only getting people that are part of the program. They're able, and I know some people out there don't like to hear this conversation, but they're able to fine-tune their resources and exactly who they want to go after by what the roster needs. So if they need to go all offensive line and defensive line last 1 year or get 6 defensive backs 1 year, that's what they're going to do. And I just love the staff for it. Whether the class ends up being top 3 or not, it's a beautiful day in Knoll Nation. So come see us at the Renegade Report.
So James, as we get to you on what you've got going there at the Den Media Group, you can also answer our super chat. So Michael Davis, I apologize. I can't see any of your super chats as we typically do on StreamYard. So James, thanks for alerting me to that. I didn't think we had any comments because it's showing 0. So anyway, jumped on here on YouTube and we got Michael Davis with a 5 spot. Thank you for that, Michael. What's y'all opinion on the new hip drop tackle rule? I've seen many athletes come out against it. How are you supposed to sack a quarterback now? I've not looked into that to see exactly what the rule states, but James, go at it.
It's basically, I'm against it, but I'm against all the rule changes. Like when it comes to tackling, I'm an offensive guy. I think that the game is inherently violent. And the more you make one side have to think and cater, it just makes it more of an offensive game. I don't think it's fair to defensive players. Now, there's a myriad of ways that I would like to get hit. One of them not being hit. But secondly, the key is to get the guy down, and they actually used to teach. It's crazy how we've gotten to this because it's like the Gator roll, which the Seattle Seahawks kind of made with, and Pete Carroll kind of made a little popular a few years ago, where you kind of come to the side of a guy and you basically take you get the legs, wrap around it, and then you roll. It's literally the exact same thing, except for you get a little bit closer on the hip drop and you literally just drop your weight and then roll down. And that leaves for like your ankle to get caught up in and some other different stuff. But like, it's kind of like when they take away hitting like a defenseless receiver. Like, I don't like that rule, not because I think you should be able to just decapitate guys. I think it just I think quarterbacks should get penalized for throwing the ball where it shouldn't go. Like, that's really what a lot of these defenseless receivers are getting hit with, is that it's just the natural course of the game. I think they're taking away not necessarily the fun, but they're taking away just you being able to be natural. And I think that that makes the game maybe because people think points equates to a fun game, and I like scoring, but I think the violence is what really draws people into it. So I don't know I don't know what to tell a defensive player, but I do know this is not going to translate to college or high school anytime soon. I hate the kicking rule more maybe than I hate the hip drop rule.
Yeah, it's tough. They took, in my opinion, I hate the hip drop. I'm glad they did away with it, but it's just it's done away with everything. I feel like they need to roll back 3 or 4 of the other rules above it in order to be able to take away the hip drop. It's like the hip drop is just a symptom of all the other hits they've taken away, to where this is basically all you can do is grab, and it's a nightmare because people have these cleats planted into the ground, and it's basically just the horse collar except for you're grabbing the hips. But like James said, how are you going to hit them? You can't just keep taking every damn thing away. They've got to roll something back, whether it's the defensive receiver or this or that. It was their answer to not fixing concussions. They didn't want to really fix concussions, so they're just trying to take every damn hit that can hurt you out of the game, which sucks. But I hate the hip drop tackle itself, but I get why they're taking it out or want to.
Well, it's not the player's fault that the strike zone that's given to them is now causing you to do a hip drop. That's the reason why it won't be taken out of college, because what are you supposed to ask these kids to do if your hands graze the quarterback's helmet? It's a penalty for hands to the face.
Crazy.
Graze it. If you hit him too high, it's roughing the passer, whether he's got the ball in his hand or not. There's so many rules that are in place that are more harmful. Now you're mad at them because the hip drop's hurting and breaking legs and knees and all that. Well, where do you want them to hit them at? And the next thing we're going to be told is the shoestring tackle is going to be eliminated because it's causing them to sprain ankles or possibly tearing Achilles or whatever. Why aren't we talking about artificial turf tearing all these knees and ankles up? Achilles are getting tore, ACLs, MCLs, all these things that are happening because these kids, they can plant their feet so well. But there's no give to what their feet are going into. We don't want to change that. Why? Because it costs money. It's cheaper to have those turf fields for X amount of time. You don't have to. There's no upkeep. You don't have to do all these crazy things. It's been going this way for a long time. It's about how much money the ones with the money can save. So we'll just keep telling these guys smaller and smaller strike zones until we have to get the two-hand touch. And then once it gets to that point, we got to start talking about all these rules again. But we still won't change what turf or what platforms that they actually play on. So the NFL can be the NFL. Y'all do what you want to. Leave college out of it.
So we are basically out of time, but James, I want you to have the floor for anything with Den Media Group.
Now, basically just right now, 520 subs away from 6,000, trying to get to 6,000. We do our cash giveaway on Big Games BS. Big Games BS, 9:30-ish, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll actually be on Saturday this week. We'll have a Dope Talk CJ show. We'll have a Dope Boys with Forrest Connolly, former offensive lineman. We'll be doing that Friday morning, so it'll be a live conversation between two former Warriors, and we'll ask whatever questions and different things. So that one should be fun with Big Foe. But as I keep trying to tell people, the minute I get to 10, if I get to 10,000 subs before football season, I'm giving away a pair of season tickets to FSU with a parking pass. So, everybody's complaining about how much these tickets are. Well, there's 2 that's going to be really, really good seating. And I encourage everybody to come check it out. Can't wait for y'all to enjoy that and see the stadium, even though with the construction. But outside of that, tailgate April 20th for the spring game. I'll be, like I said, and I said before on your show, I think Trey will be watching practice tomorrow, watching the scrimmage tomorrow. So obviously I'll have my show, but I'll also be on with Chris, where we'll be talking about what went down at practice or whatever. I don't know if it'll be before, probably more likely after, because practice goes from 4 to 6-ish. So about 6:30, by the time you leave, get my boys settled, it'll probably be right time for me to get on Chris's the Sporadics, so we could go talk about Florida State. So again, just join the channel. We like giving away free things, and I appreciate the support.
Folks, you'll see me at 8 o'clock Eastern time on the main channel. And if you want to talk college football, don't join us. Stay far, far away. We're not talking college football at all. We do that 364 days and like 22 hours all the time. We are talking about the voice of college football. That's it. Obviously, it's about college football, but it's about the channel, about the network, everything. I might be sitting there for like 8 hours talking. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I'll take your comments and questions. And if you care about the voice of college football, be there. If you want to hear about college football talk, don't be there. So we'll see you at 8 o'clock Eastern time if that is the way it stands. George, James, Chris, I know you guys have so much going on, so I appreciate you stopping everything you've got going on to make this happen each and every week.
Yes, sir.
See y'all back next Wednesday.